The WAFB Podcast Network is sponsored by Neighbors Federal Credit Union.
Hey, good morning, Jacques. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. I'm talking to Garth Brooks.
Entering his second year as the LSU head football coach.
It was the only way I could get a foot in the door.
Joined by the icon, Kim Mulkey. Hey, Coach, great to see you.
Jacques Talk is sponsored by Cork's Cajun Fried Fish and Shrimp and Couillon's Cajun Barbecue.
Welcome to Jacques Talk, and today's guest absolutely hates LSU. How about that for an intro? Nice little fun intro there.
Unfortunately, many people believe that, but you know that I don't.
I think that you're objective, but you're not afraid to write something that I know when I say something how it's going to be received, and I know sometimes some of the stories I've had to do in the past are not going to be popular. But that's not the goal, right?
Yeah, most of the time I know when something is not going to be perceived well, but sometimes it surprises me. So I don't really know. But I do kind of like to pick on LSU fans a little bit. But it doesn't mean I want them to lose, you know. But fans by nature are sensitive.
Yes.
So it's like shooting fish in a barrel, you know. It's kind of easy to get on them. And whenever you talk about their fandom, you know, how strong a fan base, if you criticize that a little bit, they're coming at you.
Yeah. Well, Glenn Guilbeau, by the way, is our guest. I never even said his name here. Glenn's a veteran writer. When's the first time you had something appear in a newspaper? You certainly remember your first time, right?
Well, interesting choice of words. Well, I worked for the Raiders Digest at Rummel High. I was a sports writer for them. I wrote about Rummel football in 1978. And then I worked for the Daily Reveille briefly as a freshman, and then as a full timer, my first job was at the Tiger Rag magazine in 1983, where I'm back. I'm back now. I'm going backwards.
Well. And I guess you're of the generation, you're from New Orleans, you said Ed Daniels would have been coming up about that same time, right?
Ed had graduated from Rummel by the time I got there, so I didn't go to school with him, but he went to school with my older brother, Kevin, and they knew each other, and I knew Ed, you know, ever since I knew Ed in 1982 when I was a student assistant at LSU Sports Info with Herb Vincent, underneath Paul Manasseh, and I got to know Ed back then. Just a great guy. I really miss him.
Yeah, not to start things off on a bummer, but certainly a huge loss, irreplaceable loss in Ed Daniels and his professionalism, and one of those guys who it wasn't about him or trying to become a star. It was about serving the community and doing your job and giving them content that was meaningful. And he and Steve Schneider, we used to joke, were like brothers from a different mother. They were like the same guy in terms of their work ethic, high school sports, making that a big priority and making it a huge impact. Steve obviously started Sportsline Friday night here over 3 decades ago. Ed Daniels' show in New Orleans is one that everyone watches as well.
And then Steve started that consecutive days of summer features on the high school teams.
Yes.
Remember, like, used to start in August, now it starts in June, right?
Well, that's true. You know, I mean, on one hand, you got to have something to fill those sportscasts with. On the other hand, you're like, are we starting this already? Really?
Yeah, it's amazing. And Ed was so funny, man. I mean, he would, the stuff he wouldn't say on broadcast, you know, like that might be a little critical of the team. He was so in sync too with, and knew what was going on, and such a good sense of humor.
I remember certainly some of the times when he was covering Sean Payton with the Saints, and it'd be like, Coach, in all your years of covering, would you say that, Ed, no legacy questions here. We're in game 4, Ed. But wouldn't you say no legacy questions, Ed? So
he had a great way of asking questions. He really, he kind of made the room go silent.
Yeah, and Charles Hannegriff reminded us that he was the one that asked Les Miles when Les Miles had his near-death experience on the job in terms of almost losing his job, the Texas A&M season finale of 2015, when we all thought that a change was going to be made, and then Joe Oliva comes to the podium, and Les Miles is our coach, and he'll continue to be our coach, okay? But I think it was Ed that asked Les about changing up the offense.
Yeah.
And he said, well, the engine's pretty stinking good, huh?
Oh,
Leonard
yeah.
Fournette, the engine. And so
Yeah, that was classic. I remember that.
that was foreshadowing that Les, despite almost losing his job, was not going to change anything.
No,
So,
and he never did.
He did?
Never
No.
Some people thought he would, but we found out quickly, and I was not surprised at all. Neither was Scooter Hobbs. I remember we were saying he's not going to change anything, and then the Wisconsin game happened. We all saw that.
toss dive, first 2 plays of the game. So it was almost like a big, you know what, to the fans, you know. Oh, yeah, watch
question.
this. You
No
think I'm
question.
going to the spread? Haha. Watch this. So anyway, moving into current times, and certainly LSU's done a great job remembering Ed Daniels. And
Yes.
in the photography room, there's a picture of him and some flowers, and in the press box, they've done
A lot of class.
a nice job as well. I'm still shocked by it. You know, it's just still like
I know.
67 years old in 2024 is way too young. But anyway, we're thinking about you, Ed. LSU football, current day. You and I were talking before we came on. I really don't feel like they've played a great game yet.
No, they haven't, and they're running out of weeks. You know, they need to have a really good game going into Ole Miss, and you know they've had some improvement. The defense has had key stops against USC and South Carolina in the second half, even though their total stats are not there. And you know Nussmeier has played well all season. But you know, just a lot of silly mistakes, and as Brian Kelly said, maddening.
Yeah, he used that word 3 times. I think I was sitting right next to you. I think we were both counting it. It was like 1, oh, maddening, 2, 3. He said it. He used that word 3 times. And look, I hope they win all their games and it's fun. But his press conferences have been interesting.
Oh yeah.
Like this last one, I think he was joking when he was talking about the 290-plus drives, and he goes, first time in 20 years. You guys know that? Now put your hand down. You don't know. Or you've been here for 20 years, but you don't know.
And Scooter said that Todd Politz told you that. And he goes, I knew it already.
Yeah.
He's a good deadpanner, man. He's funny.
He made a face at the end of saying that lended itself, okay, he was kidding.
Yeah.
But then he got asked about Mason Taylor, and he's like, you guys want to talk about everyone else except Mason Taylor. Nobody wanted to talk about Mason Taylor, and I don't want to talk about him. You know, and so it was like, well, you brought him to SEC Media Days, so we did talk about him.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. You had to do that, and then he brought up the retractable roof thing. That was hilarious.
Yeah, I asked that question, and I think a few people in the room rolled their eyes, but it was a hot topic. Sorry, the pun, but it was a hot topic that day in terms of look. Some people say society is soft and they're spoiled. But look, from my perspective, in your spare time, the things you do should be enjoyable. And sitting on the east side of Tiger Stadium when it's 91 degrees on aluminum seats, when the sun is just pounding you, look, I'm going to hit the shade, you know, or stay at my house. But
what were they thinking when they built it? They should have turned it a little bit. Just like the stadium in Omaha, most stadiums from home plate face the skyline. They got it backwards. So, but it was tough. It was tough for those fans for sure.
Well, you know, and look, I remember I was in high school in 1992. And I'm the kind of loser that even in the Curly Holman days was daydreaming about LSU football all summer and can't wait to go to the first game. And 1992, I think it was the same week as Hurricane Andrew. LSU opened with Texas A&M, 2:30 in the afternoon on ABC, and it was just very, very hot.
In Baton Rouge?
In Baton Rouge.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, talking to Kevin Falk, his first game was in 1995 at Texas A&M on that turf.
Yeah.
And that was just even worse. So,
yeah, the hottest games I've ever been to have been at Texas A&M.
Yeah, back when they played on that turf, I mean, I don't know, they would do a reading and, you know, whatever, 120, 130. I mean, my softball tournament, my charity softball tournament, someone shot the field on the turf and it was like 165, you know, off the turf. So, day games in September are nothing new, but I do think there's a conversation at this point. Hey, look, maybe this shouldn't take place at Auburn or Gainesville or Baton Rouge. Play the games at night. What do you think?
Yeah, and usually it hasn't happened that much at that time of year because, you see, this was not a rent-a-win. That would have been a night game, kind of like South Alabama's a night game next week. Though that's not a rent-a-win.
Right.
But it's a mid-major. You know, UCLA, normally that would have been a night game, but UCLA is not that good.
Right.
You know, so that's kind of how that happened. But, yeah, that was – and plus it was at 2:30 because, 3 o'clock is always the hottest time of day down here. So it would have been better at 11 or maybe even a nice little 5 or 6 night game. But yeah, it was difficult on the fans. You could tell.
I mean, it's a different era, and I'm not criticizing any fans, but I remember going to those games, even in the Curly Holman era, when people would stay to the end. There's just too much. There's too many options.
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm at my house and my bathroom's here, my fridge is here, my TV's here, and really, honestly, when you're sitting in the stands, you miss out on so much as opposed to watching it on TV.
Oh, sure.
They're changing camera angles. They're telling you information. You're seeing replays. I mean, the fan experience has improved a lot in Tiger Stadium. I'm not criticizing that, but
it's a commitment, man. I mean, it's like, and I compared it to Jazz Fest. You know, you got to be committed to be out there in the heat for about 8 hours. You know, because the pregame and staying at the game and getting to the game. You know, but it can be difficult. But you know, the thing about LSU fans, they're very picky. You know, their team's got to wear white. They got to play at night.
Right.
You know, and at times they are the greatest fan base ever, but not on a consistent basis, I would say.
Well, as Buddy Sanjay used to say about John Brady, they'd ask him, "Coach, what's the best thing about LSU?" The fans. What's the worst thing about LSU? The fans.
That is kind of true, you know. But boy, when things are good, you know, when that temperature's right and it's a big game, you know, and it's a night game, then there's no place better to watch a game.
Well, they're going to get into that because I think the Ole Miss game is either going to be at 5 or 7. And certainly I would think the Alabama game would be at night. And, you know, these early games, you can't wait till football season. But the essence of football is kind of in October when the temperatures drop a bit and the leaves turn on the trees and all that coming up. You know, and look, I'm just joking here. But like you said, it's always the thing that you're not doing that they want. Like in the PMAC for years, I heard, you know, the student section should be behind the goal, you know, to put it on the sideline. It needs to be like Duke, like when they're shooting free throws, all the students are doing this. So they moved it. Then I start hearing, you know, that student section needs to be back on the sidelines where it was when Chris Jackson and Ricky Blanton and all them played. That's when it was great, you know. And the scheduling too, you know. For years it was like, I don't want us to play UTEP first game or whatever. We need to have a big game to start. Now you're playing the big game to start and you can't win them. Oh, well, we got to play why aren't we playing a week 0 game? Or please stop playing these big games to start. So
you need to get off. You need to get off of Tiger Droppings.
Somebody sent me something the other day. My friends go there, and look, I think anyone in the media, if they say they'd never gone to Tiger Droppings, maybe they're lying. Matt Moscona says he hasn't gone there in like a decade, but somebody sent me something the other day and said that Jacques Doucet, he used to ask tough questions, but now he's quiet as a church mouse since he got his fancy promotion. My fancy promotion. You know, I got a jacuzzi down in the sports office now and a $150,000 sports car outside. But no, I'm not hurting. I'm just kidding. But yeah. Anyway, Tiger Droppings. There was a line in Star Wars, one of the prequels, says Obi-Wan said, into the holograms or whatever you go, nothing but pain will you find there. And if you're a media person, insert yourself in Tiger Dropping, nothing but pain will you find there, perhaps. So
I do go on it every now and then. My wife reads it religiously, but usually what I tell people is, you know, for every 10 that are really killing me on there, there's always one guy that takes up for me. I don't know who it is. You know, I look at the little thing, I don't know who it is, but there's always, you know, it's a different person each time. But there's always a couple of people out there that will take up for me.
So we touched upon that right off the top, but just so how do you feel about some of the people that say those things, that you hate LSU, Glenn Guilbeau, and you're trying to tick me off?
Well, you know, I just think that they, you know, by definition, if you're a fan, that's short for fanatic. So it's always been a big mystery. You know, they teach us to be objective, yet your audience is anything but objective.
Correct.
So
right.
Naturally, if you are doing your job right, there's going to be some pushback. You know, and it's funny because like when I'll write a feature about how good this player is or how good this team is, you know, I'll get a real nice compliment. But they don't. I don't know if they really like the story as much as they just agree with it. You know, it's all about agreeing or disagreeing. But I think LSU fans are like most fan bases. They tend to be delusional and they tend to not really want to hear the truth all the time.
Right.
You know, but you know, for the most part, you know, people realize that it doesn't really matter to me one way or the other if LSU wins. I would rather LSU win because it's more fun. you know, and you go on bigger trips and your stories perform better, you know, but I don't really get upset if they lose like the fans do. Now, when I was first starting out, I would kind of get upset when they lose, you know, but then you kind of grow out of that, I thought.
Yeah. Well, and I've kind of learned that LSU is going to be here long after I'm gone and we're gone, you know, and they won't miss me.
Right.
I mean, there are people that miss me, but the monster will move on without us. So. Yeah, I find that too sometimes even when I try to do a good job and preview a game and show that the other team's got this player who's really good and the other player and this quarterback, whatever, you're trying to like set things up that, hey, this is a challenge this week. Then it's all like, oh, you're just talking up the other team, you know, you don't think we can stop them and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, Steve Snyder told me a long time ago, if no one's upset with you, you're not doing your job.
Yeah, that's what I've always thought too. And you know, either way, if you're covering LSU, if you're overly positive or overly negative or in the middle, they're going to read you. You know, that's the thing. I mean, they're gonna read you and follow you no matter what, even though they say they're not.
Right.
You know, sometimes they're still going to follow you because they can't stay away.
Well, like they can't stay away from LSU football, even with the changes now and the NIL and the transfer portal. I've seen some people on Facebook make the comment, you know, that's the last straw. I'm not watching anymore. BS.
Yeah.
You're watching. You know, I mean, I mean, like in the 70s, for example, I joked about if you were a kid when Kiss came out, you know, they've hooked you for life. You know, even in your 50s and 60s, you're going to watch Kiss. And if you like Star Wars and this, you know, LSU football is the same. I mean, if they hooked you when a kid, you're never walking away.
Well, yeah, and you know, I'm really more of I've never covered the Saints full time like I've covered LSU. Yep. I've always kind of covered the Saints on the side, but I'm just as critical of the Saints. But I'm really more of a Saints fan, you know, because I grew up with the Saints. They were always my first team.
Yeah.
And even like as an adult, when the Saints had the bad years with Aaron Brooks and everything, I remember, you know, I got to quit wasting my Sunday watching this team. And sure enough, every Sunday I'm sitting there watching them. Well, maybe they can score here and get within 30, you know?
Yeah. Well, the Aaron Brooks era, that was the true definition of, you know, Godfather 3. Just when I got out, they brought me back in, you know?
Oh, yeah.
You know, they would start 4-8. And then they'd win their last 4, and it's the last week. Well, if we win this and this guy loses, we might get in the playoffs. And then we don't. And so, but yeah, he was the ultimate. Looked like a Pro Bowler one week. Next week, he was terrible. You know, it was just ups and downs with Aaron Brooks and Jim Haslett and Dante Stallworth and that whole group of guys. That was just maddening.
I have had people tell me that maddening. That's the word of the week. I have had people tell me that if I had not grown up a Saints fan, I would have a lot more positive outlook on life and on LSU. But I mean, really, I was a Saint fan from 1968 when I was 7 years old until, you know, now. And so for the first 20 years of my life, from 67 to 86, they didn't have a winning season.
That's
you know?
right.
And I remember getting excited about 5-9. Oh man, we went 5-9. Yeah. We're getting there, you know.
I just remember I didn't grow up on these things, but 79 they went 8-8.
Oh yeah, that was a good team, man.
Archie Manning, and they had like 3 Pro Bowlers.
Yeah, Chuck Muncie, Hank Childs, and Wes Chandler. Great, the greatest offense in history of the Saints until that 2011 Saints team.
Yeah.
But just a terrible defense, like Spagnola's defense when Peyton got suspended. It was they broke that record. But that was a great offense. Archie won NFL Man of the Year, and they were pretty good in '78 too. They went 7-9, but really good offense. Tony Galbraith on that team as well.
So in '79 they go 8-8, they get everyone's hopes up, and in '80 they go 1-15.
Exactly.
Right? It was the worst team they ever had.
Exactly. Yeah, that was the cocaine team. They were
cocaine.
It really was. George Rogers and
Muncie.
Muncie, and Rogers came a little bit later, right? And they had a defensive end named Reese, who was from Miami, and it was
speaking of
bad.
Cocaine, Miami. Yeah, Chuck Muncie to this day is not in the Saints Hall of Fame, and it's been a controversial subject over the years because he went to San Diego and was great, right?
Yeah.
After that, and
he was great with New Orleans.
He was great with the Saints. Yeah. I've heard many people say he's one of the greatest, most talented players that ever played for the Saints, but because of his off-the-field problems, that's kept him out.
Yeah, he just passed away a few years ago. He had cleaned up and but still had some health issues. But boy, you talk about a great player, man. I mean, I remember they would not whenever they had a chance to push him out of bounds, that's what they would do because they could not tackle him. He was so big and fast. He was like 220. He was so fast. I never forget. He missed a whole week of practice. No injury. He just didn't go to practice. Hank Stram was the coach. He was AWOL for some reason. He shows up Sunday, gains 97 yards against the Rams on no practice.
Wow. Yeah. I got spoiled real quick, as I have gotten spoiled in much of my life. My first year of being a fan of football and getting hooked was 1987. So LSU goes 10-1-1. And beats South Carolina in the Gator Bowl. Tommy Hotson, Wendell Davis. They finished 5th in the country.
And that was coming off of them making the Final 8 in basketball.
That was before I was kind of watching. I remember hearing my dad when I wasn't even yelling. That was when they lost to Indiana.
Indiana, yes.
Fess Irvin missed some free throws,
yes.
And then they missed like a putback. They were lost by a point or something.
Yeah.
And then the Saints started winning.
That's right. First winning season, 87.
87, and I'm thinking this is the way it goes. My parents like, Jacques, the Saints don't win. But they went on that. I think they won 9 games in a row. The strike. They had the John Fourcade and the Scrubs all played. I'm not calling you a scrub, John. I know you started later, but they had this strike.
Yeah.
Saturday Night Live was doing skits about the guys who were playing the NFL. They were like a plumber the week before, and now they're starting at linebacker.
That was true, too.
But yeah, I just remember that the Saints started winning, and Bobby Hebert was the quarterback. They had that defense that was amazing with the dome patrol. Eric Martin, Dalton Hilliard on offense also.
That was also the woulda, coulda, shoulda year, too.
Yeah.
When they lost to San Francisco at home, he said, the Saints ain't good enough.
Yeah. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. And I think Martin Anderson missed a field goal, a long one at the end.
Yeah.
And then after that game is when they went on the tear.
And then made the playoffs, but lost in the first round of Minnesota at home. Oh, that was tough.
Yeah, that was a blowout. And people didn't maybe think they were going to hear about the 1987 Saints, but I'm going to go ahead because I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I just remember watching those games that year.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh. They had like 2 goal line stands. Pittsburgh was trying to drive it in at the end. Old Three Rivers Stadium.
Wow.
The guy with the mustache, Mark Malone. He was the quarterback of the Steelers.
Oh, yeah.
And they slammed the door shut on Pittsburgh on a 4th and goal. Didn't get in.
That was the game they clinched the winning season, I think.
I think you're right.
Maybe the playoffs, one or the other. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and then I think Hebert got hurt, and then Dave Wilson came in at Cincinnati and led him back on a comeback. He had a mustache too. But yeah, I just remember that playoff against the Vikings. They sacked Wade Wilson like second play of the game. He fumbled. Bobby Hebert hit Eric Martin for a touchdown at 7-0. The dome's rocking, and from that point, awful. 44-10, they got beat.
Yeah. That's amazing. But they're few and far between. But every team around Louisiana just about has had their moments. I mean, the baseball team at LSU's won 7 national championships. They've won 3 football national championships this century. The Saints got a Super Bowl, so there's been bad with good.
I could have never dreamed of getting the chance to do what I've done at Channel 9 because I started in 2001. And I immediately start with Rohan Davey and Brady James and Josh Reed and Trev Falk and all those guys winning the SEC. And then 2 years later, LSU's winning a national championship. I can't believe I'm doing this for this is my job. And then
I remember when you started.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Out there talking to Skip out at baseball practice in the 01 season, I remember. But, I mean, you look at it, you and I and a lot of people here, we had a chance to cover Skip and Nick Saban. That's 2 of the best coaches ever in their sport.
And it's always fascinating to hear Skip talk about Nick, and this is another thing that some people do that drives me nuts. They get emotional and they try to change history. So they try to, some people, I read Saban would still be here if Skip didn't run him off.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just like, Are you stupid? I mean, they did everything they could to keep him.
Yeah.
Wayne Huizinga, the owner of the Dolphins at the time, offered him, I think, $7 million at the time, which Skip, it's just like $15 million today, And Skip, Nick was going to coach NFL football.
Exactly.
He was going to do that. There was no stopping it. Now, it was unfortunate that he didn't start at Alabama, fail in the NFL, and then come to LSU, as opposed to start at LSU, fail in the NFL, and go to Alabama like he did.
Yeah,
So,
Skip, I mean, they did everything they could. And Skip knew that Nick wanted to scratch that itch. He had been wanting to do that for years, become an NFL head coach. So he knew that he was going to do that. But instead of throwing him all this money, Skip did tell him, he said, Nick, what you have to, and this is in the Skip Bertman book I did, he said, Nick, you have to decide, do you want to be Vince Lombardi or do you want to be the greatest college coach ever? And Nick decided he wanted to be the greatest college coach ever, but it was after he was already at Miami. And he praised Skip for saying that. So, Skip tried everything he could.
And this is another one. This one's even more ridiculous. The fact, or some people think that LSU somehow, after Les Miles goes 11-2, finishes 5th in the country, goes 11-2 and finishes 3rd in the country, that somehow LSU was supposed to intercept Nick Saban between Miami and Alabama, fire Les Miles, and bring Saban back.
Yeah.
That, I'm sorry, okay, we know now. Okay, yeah, I guess you would do it now knowing what you know. But there's this thing called, public relations and, firing a coach who's 22-4 with 2 top 5 finishes to bring a guy back who left you. I don't think so. So that's another thing that's been brought up. They could have done that. Have you've heard that, right? That they was kind of reached out, but they couldn't.
I think they did kind of reach out, or some people did. It might not have been an official LSU move, but I think some of the people in that circle that were in on hiring coaches and so forth, I think they kind of checked it out because you have had coaches leave a school, go to the NFL, and come back. Mike Riley, I think, at Oregon State did that. But Nick didn't want to do that because he felt like he would have been going backwards or something. Plus, he thought Les was doing a great job, and he was. His first 2 seasons were great, but
first 3, he was 34-6.
Yeah, oh yeah, he was rolling. He really was, and he beat Saban 3 times out of the first 6 times they played or something. Les beat Saban in 7, lost in 8 and 9, and then won in 10 and 11. So yeah, he was 3-2 against him when he went to the national championship game. Yeah. And had 1 national championship to Nick's only 1.
Correct.
So they were even, and Les was ahead. So, and when you look at the big picture, Les did a great job here. There's no question about it.
Well, everything swung on that January 9th, I think it was.
2012. Yeah.
Because, like you said, there was a growing kind of sentiment that Miles was establishing his own legacy. And the players liked him, and he was a player's coach, and he was much more affable and approachable than that mean Nick Saban over there. And 21-0 that day. Saban made adjustments, did a lot of play-action passes, did a lot of things they didn't do in the first game that LSU won in Tuscaloosa. And LSU thought because Georgia Southern ran the option against Alabama for a lot of yardage late in the year, they could do it, and it was. It's a mind-boggling thing to me that you had 40 days to prepare for the biggest game of your life, and that's what you rolled out there. So
some people never got over that loss. Some fans, as far as Les was concerned, that was the end.
I got a friend named Jeff Bro. He says Les Miles still owes him $2,000 or $3,000 for the hotel, the plane ticket, not the plane ticket, the hotel, the ticket to the game, and those things he spent on that day. And then the next year, in 2012, when they kind of had the game won and TJ Yeldon swing pass, that was just, if your heart wasn't ripped out by that point, it was
that was a good team too. Les was still pretty good for a few years after that, but it gradually went down.
That was the Alabama team that played Brian Kelly and Notre Dame and beat him 42-14. I remember Lou Holtz being on the ESPN set after the game, like someone had shot his dog. He's like, Notre Dame just wasn't ready to play today. I don't know why. And I was like, well, I think I know why, because Alabama's probably got 20 NFL players and Notre Dame's got 5.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it is amazing when you look at all the coaches that Notre Dame has had since Lou Holtz. Brian Kelly is easily better than any one of them. I mean, and I think he's the winningest coach in Notre Dame history. But he's the only one that really restored him to that level. He didn't win a national championship like Lou Holtz did, but he's definitely much better than anyone else before, or really the coach now is not that great either.
Yeah, and to bring it to the present now with LSU and Brian Kelly, and I talked about this last week, after LSU lost to USC, I was in my car driving home, and I heard some CBS national host, I think he was a fill-in, and he goes, I just don't see Brian Kelly making it to year 4 at LSU. And
wow.
I'm saying to myself, well, are you familiar with his contract? Because he's at $10 million a year guaranteed, 90% of the contract's guaranteed. There is no upcoming divorce between LSU and Brian Kelly. And I'm a guy who grew up, like I said, some people would say that's a problem, that I grew up not having high expectations. That if LSU won 8 games, 9 games, played a bowl game, won a big game over a top 5 team, I'd be happy. That you should be competing for the national title every year. But then, so what? The second LSU loses 2 games and they're out of the playoff hunt, then you can't enjoy the rest of the season. So LSU's at a point now where they're investing in coaches more than they ever have before. Facilities, you've got coordinators making $2.5 million a year. I don't know what Curly Hallman made back in the day. What did he make? Like $200,000 a year,
I don't
or something
think he made that much. I really don't. I think his base salary was like might have been in the 70s or 80s. His base salary. And, he had the TV show and stuff, but he did not make much at all.
Yeah, DiNardo might have gotten to $400,000 maybe, or $300,000 because he was winning early. So where are we crazy now? Are we to the point, the good news about 2019 is that, boy, you talked about cocaine, and I've never done it, but talk about the natural drug of 2019 and wanting that to come back. When that's maybe not a realistic, you can win a national title, but the greatest team of all time may not be coming back.
Yeah, but I mean, that was such a special season, and it kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, they were pretty good the year before, but talking about Brian Kelly, there's no way he would have to have a losing season, either this year or some other year, and then follow that with a losing season. That's probably the only way. That's most of the time. That's how LSU coaches get fired. Les was a little different because he kind of gradually started going down.
Just got stale.
Yeah. But I mean, Brian Kelly isn't. Even if he'd have lost to South Carolina this year, Baton Rouge would be burning, but he would not be in any danger of getting fired. Now, when it is time to make that decision, though, it really doesn't matter what the contract is. I mean, we've seen that. I mean, look at all the money Ed Orgeron walked away with, so the contracts are made to be broken. But
even after 5 years, Glenn, you're talking about $50 million to pay out. I mean, that's not the 17 that Ed got or the whatever Les got, 14 or 15. I mean, that's disgusting, really. I mean,
and what did Jimbo get? Jimbo got 37 to walk
I think
away?
got 70.
Oh, he got 70. Okay, so that would still be less than Jimbo. But LSU doesn't have the type of money A&M has. And really the thing that Kelly is up against that Orgeron and Les were not, because you and I spoke about this before, is like one of the reasons Kelly, I think, came to LSU was because, hell, Les Miles and Ed Orgeron won a national championship there. I could win too.
Right.
I think that's what he might have been thinking. But, I mean, it's so different now with the portal and with NIL, because LSU is not this big NIL school. They're kind of middle of the road with the money they're paying. Yeah. And back in the day, LSU could recruit to its stadium. You never hear kids talking about, I want to go play at Tiger Stadium. They just want to get paid. So all the advantages LSU used to have in recruiting, Tiger Stadium, the game day atmosphere, they use that a lot. And the facilities, nobody talks about facilities anymore either. It's all NIL, and there's not enough of those. LSU needs an army of rich people, not just the Raising Cane's guy and the
Gordon McKernan.
Gordon McKernan. They need some more guys to get that NIL money. Ole Miss has a better NIL situation than LSU.
Which has made it harder for me to judge coaches. Like, I used to be able to have a decent sense of, okay, this guy's doing a real good job, this guy's not doing a real good job, these are the best coaches, these aren't the best coaches. Now, when it's coming down to just paying players, it's kind of like, that's kind of out of the coach's hand to an extent.
Yeah,
so it's like how do I judge Brian Kelly? I know they're paying him a lot of money, but if their resources in the NIL don't meet others, then is that his fault or not? And they apparently are improving it, and they feel a lot better than they did before about it.
Right.
But Ole Miss is really set up this year.
Well, I mean, there might be a day where the boosters and the people at a school decide, well, let's put all our money in NIL and don't pay a coach a lot of money. Just get some guy,
right.
Who's like an okay coach, but you don't have to pay him a lot. Pay all the money to the players. I mean, you see that in the NBA,
Sure. Yeah, I think Nick Saban one time said, people make a lot about my motivational tactics and my this and that. It ain't that hard. I get the best players, But Jimmy's and Joe's, not X's and O's, which still he brought things to the table that made him great. But getting the best players that's where you start.
and Kelly's been a really good recruiter, I think, but just he's got to step it up, I think, and because there's not a lot of talent on the defensive line on this team, not a lot of depth there, and he missed on a couple of guys because of NIL on the defensive line this offseason, but he's doing just about everything. I mean, eventually he's going to win a national championship, I believe.
You think at LSU?
Oh yeah.
Well, and I talked to him kind of small chatted one day, and I think he wants to coach as long as Saban did. I think he wants to coach to early 70s.
Wow.
And he appears to be in good health and everything. So we'll see how that goes. It's always been kind of a quirky fit, I think. Guy from the North coming here. He has been a lot more affable and approachable than I thought he was going to be. I'd covered him in those 2 bowl games LSU played against him and walked away like, this guy, I'm not using any sound bites from that. But I've done 3 sit-downs with him, and I think he always gives intelligent answers, good answers. He doesn't give you a throwaway answer. I don't think.
Right.
He makes an effort to answer your questions.
He does. He's a professional. He'll even answer the questions that maybe are not the greatest questions. That somebody just looking for a soundbite or something. But he's a nice guy in that respect. He's professional. He was. Nick would often well, I'm not answering that. Whatever, But Brian can be funny. He's got a good dry sense of humor. That's what kind of surprised me. I didn't see that at Notre Dame.
Les would sometimes just go talk in circles, and you wouldn't have any information. Now, when Les did conjure the Force, so to speak, I didn't intend to use so many Star Wars references today, but when he would conjure the Force every now and then, he would have these dynamite, like the 2012 Ole Miss game. When
the hammer and the nail.
No, that was Florida 13.
Oh, okay.
The Ole Miss one was when Odell ran back the punt, and he goes,
it
looked just like the Billy Cannon run. Is today Halloween? Shucks. Okay. That was the kiss him on the mouth if you're a girl all that.
Yeah.
That he went on for 7 minutes without stopping or something like that. It was Columbus Day,
Well, Kelly, like Saban, he knows offense and defense. He can talk about both, and he knows the whole roster. Les used to not really know all the defensive players, and Coach O had never been a coordinator. He wasn't that technical with his comments,
right?
But he was good though. He was honest and candid and entertaining. And he did a hell of a job. You can't take that away from Coach O. But Kelly is really a CEO. He's coached more on offense before he became a head coach, but he did coach defense too, and he played linebacker in college.
You and I both went on the Paul Feinbaum show this past week, and Feinbaum, I think he was trying to have some fun. He goes, "So what is Ed Ogeron up to these days?"
Oh, I saw that part with you, yeah.
And it's funny because I did an interview with Will Wade. I went to McNeese last spring.
Yeah.
Probably one of the best interviews I've ever done. I'm not patting myself on the back, but just he was so great, answering questions. And I heard back from a lot of LSU fans. It kind of gave them closure. It's like the girlfriend that left them. It's like, oh, we miss Will Wade so much. We wish he'd come back. And one of his best lines in that interview was, "People told me if you go to LSU, it never ends well." And that is so true and so funny. With the exception of Skip Bertman and Saban leaving for the NFL, not many people walk away from LSU on their own.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. And Wade has he's come a long way from when he was at LSU. I mean, he realizes how he messed up, and he seems like he's grown from that. I didn't get to talk to him personally, but I heard some interviews of him with him when he went to the NCAA tournament last year, and what a first season he had at McNeese, and they're going to be good again this year. So good luck to him.
Yeah, I mean, did things at McNeese that were never done before.
Right.
I think they'd only been to the tournament twice in their history before last year.
Yeah.
The last time was like in '88 or something.
He knew how to schedule too. He found some school that's its name is a women's school. I mean, it's obviously not a women's school, but it kept the name. But I think he'll have probably a big job at this time next year.
Yeah, he's a master of scheduling and putting teams on the schedule that they don't have the name recognition, but they'll bump you up in the. It's not the RPI now; it's the what do they call that?
He became really good at that when he was at what was the
VCU?
VCU, yeah. He knew how to schedule there.
Well, let's finish down the stretch here with current LSU. This weekend, LSU plays host to South Alabama. Now, LSU is a 20.5-point favorite, I believe. But Major Applewhite, I did not cover him. I wasn't here yet, but he played at Catholic High and then went to Texas. And I think Chris Sims was over at Texas at the same time.
He was.
Chris Sims was always the prototypical, looks like the quarterback. Major Applewhite doesn't look like much, red hair, but he would always have the intangibles, get in the game and like win the big games and put up the big stats. And Chris Sims seemed to always like throw the pick.
Yeah, it's amazing. I tried to get Major Applewhite on Tiger Egg Radio this week, but I plan on going down to Mobile and interviewing him. But Major Applewhite is Quinn Ewers, and Chris Sims is Arch Manning. I mean, it's an amazing comparison.
Yeah.
Because I interviewed Major when he was at Texas, when I was at the Baton Rouge Advocate, and it was when Sims was they wanted Sims to become the starter, but he just wasn't doing the job. And Applewhite, they kept taking him off and then putting him back, and Applewhite kept the job. So there was a lot of comparisons, and it was a great interview. And I've talked to him about that since. But he's really in the same situation as Ewers, because everybody wanted Sims. But in that case, I don't think Sims is as good as Arch. But still, Arch, we really don't know. It's very much the same thing. And Quinn is a Heisman candidate, where Major was never a Heisman candidate at Texas. But he was a very good quarterback there and won a lot.
I think he threw for 473 yards in his last game, Holiday Bowl or something like that.
And those two didn't get along. Like Quinn and Arch
Yeah.
are getting along, but Major and Sims, they didn't really get along that great.
Yeah.
Because Sims was kind of a jerk. I mean, he arrived to practice in a limo, his first ever practice. That was the complete opposite of Arch and Archie.
Oh, and his father was the Super Bowl MVP, and I covered that Cotton Bowl LSU played against him, when they had Roy Williams, the wide receiver. I think Cedric Benson was the running back.
Yeah, I think Major was gone by then, yeah.
And Sims was the quarterback. And
Right.
he came into the press conference, and he's like, I don't have to talk about any interceptions today or any of that. And he kind of cursed a little bit, too. And it was just a turnoff, back then. He's now on NBC now.
Yeah, and I don't think he
broadcaster.
played hardly at all in the NFL. I think he was around just briefly.
Yeah.
But
I don't think Chris Sims is going to watch this. But
and Major has quite an offense at South Alabama now. This is a dangerous game for LSU.
Well, I joked about the old Karate Kid, no mercy, sweep the leg. They scored 87 on Northwestern State. I'm like, after 70, isn't that enough? But and then they went to Appalachian State, where apparently they were an underdog, and they won 48-14. So
out there too. Yeah. So he's got some players, man. Some skilled players, and LSU has lost to two mid-majors in the state of Alabama. Troy, just a few years ago,
2017,
when Coach O was the coach, and of course UAB with Nick Saban. That was in 2000. But I think the way LSU has struggled in spots on defense, this is a dangerous game.
Well, and Major Applewhite, he's like Johnny Cash. I've been everywhere, man. He's coached at Syracuse, Alabama, Houston, Texas. Now South Alabama, and he's always been regarded as one of the best offensive minds in college football. Feinbaum reminded me that he was Nick Saban's first OC at Alabama in 2007.
Right.
That game that LSU won 41-34 that day in Tuscaloosa. But
he only lasted 1 year, though. he was they didn't get along great, and he was kind of too young at that point.
Yeah, he's got a running back named Fluff Bothwell, a freshman who's got 9.7 yards per carry, and Kentrell Bullock is another running back, and Gio Lopez is the quarterback, and they're scoring lots of points. And it'll be interesting for LSU, who is now dealing with 3 season-ending injuries. They lost John Emery Jr., they lost Jacobian Guillory, defensive lineman, and now Harold Perkins Jr. Tears his ACL, it appears, and he's out for the year as well.
Yeah, that's the toughest of the 3. No question, and he was not having a great year yet, but it looked like he was going to have a good season. And he was taking up blockers, allowing Swinson to get those sacks the last 2 weeks. Swinson said that in interviews last week. So because he attracted so much attention from the other team's game plan and blockers, so that's a huge thing that's a huge player to lose. As Coach Kelly said yesterday, he can wreck your day.
Yeah. That's the opposite, or the defensive version of Reggie Bush we used to hear. Reggie Bush would go this way, and all these guys would go with him, and
right.
open things up for other people. This like we said, LSU last week, look, they're tied with UCLA, 17-17 at the half. UCLA, they wobbled their way past Hawaii. They only scored 1 offensive touchdown. They got just drilled in the Rose Bowl by Indiana. And so in years past with Chip Kelly, they were winning 8-9 games. This UCLA team is not winning 8-9 games.
No way.
They're going to have a losing record. So LSU not hitting on all cylinders yet. And so they got the South Alabama game. Then there's an open date. And then really the rest of the year, there's no game that you can point at and say LSU's definitely going to win. I mean,
yeah, Arkansas looks better than we thought going into the season. And I would say Texas A&M probably does too.
Well, the Arkansas game has been a field goal game every year since 2020. And Arkansas always, that's their Super Bowl. I always, when we go over there and we watch the local TV, and it's like, this is our biggest game of the year. The LSU Tigers are coming in, and LSU doesn't view Arkansas that way.
No.
And in the past, that game was always after the Alabama game for LSU, so it was just in this really tough spot. And so, the last time they went up there, they didn't have their starting quarterback. Weren't they playing a wide receiver at quarterback, and LSU won 13-10?
Right.
With Jaden Daniels.
Yeah, that was after they beat Alabama. In the overtime, and that was a big game for Perkins, if you remember.
He won the game.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, they've had an interesting history with Arkansas. So that could be a tougher game. Right now, Ole Miss hasn't played anybody, but they're scoring a lot of points. They got a great roster, and Kiffin seems to get up for LSU. He's a good play caller, so that's going to be a major test for Blake Baker.
Ole Miss was running away with that game in Tiger Stadium in 2022, and then LSU came back, and Matt House, one of his finest hours, I guess, at LSU, they made adjustments, and they shut down that Ole Miss offense after that. So down the stretch we go with the Tigers, and the Saints lost Eric McCoy for a stretch of time. They started 2-0. Look, they weren't guaranteed to go to the Super Bowl when they started 2-0, and they're not going to have a losing season just because they lost a game. But that's going to be tough for them because the offensive line, all during training camp, was viewed as perhaps going to be a disaster like LSU's defensive line, and they had really exceeded expectations.
Yeah, and it's a shame because the center is really important, and as Dennis Allen said after the game Sunday, McCoy was probably their best offensive lineman, and you could just see he left on the 3rd play of the game, and they did not have a good day running the ball. Kamara averaged about 3 yards a carry as a team. It was about 3 yards a carry. They missed that huge 4th and 1 late, which you wonder why they went for it, but they had a chance to win. I thought they played tough at the end. The defense played well, except for the 2 huge plays. I still think they're pretty good. The tough thing is they're at Atlanta, where they've won 5 of the last 6 in Atlanta, and then Kansas City's in the Dome.
No, it's on the road.
I'm sorry, Kansas City's on Monday Night Football on the road. And then they're at Tampa Bay, where they've also won 5 of the last 6 at Tampa. And then Sean Payton comes in the next Thursday, I think. So that's a tough schedule. So it would have been nice to have that 3-0 cushion But I still think they're pretty good. I think they have a chance still to make the playoffs.
Yeah, well, this week will tell a lot. If they bounce back on the road and win in Atlanta, that'll make people feel better. If they lay an egg, then it's like, oh, here we go again. So
then the Tampa Bay game will be key because I don't think if they can just play well against Kansas City, I think people would be happy.
Yeah. Dennis Allen, he's just not Mr. Charisma. He's obviously a great defensive coach. And he's not supposed to be Mr. Charisma. He's supposed to win games. But it'd be interesting to see if he saves himself this year or at the end of the year we're talking about a coaching change there.
Yeah, I think this is that year for him for sure. That's what everybody thought going in. He's amazing. I've never really seen him lose his temper or anything.
No, he's not an emotional.
Yeah.
And usually defensive guys are below their tops.
He's a very nice guy, and like as fun as it was to cover Peyton, you never knew when he was going to jump on you.
Oh, yeah.
Like I asked him a question about that. Remember that where he ordered the Falcon at the restaurant in the commercial?
Right.
Well, I asked him about that. It was preseason. I was doing a feature on the commercial, and he goes, "You got anything else?" But he would jump on people. He'd jump on Brett Martell with the AP a lot, but he was entertaining. But yeah, Dennis, man, he's an even keel guy.
The one time he got me as we wrap up here, the Saints were playing the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday Night Football, 2010. It was Halloween.
Oh yeah. I remember that. The year after the Super Bowl.
A week before was when Les Miles and I, and in one of my more unprofessional moments at the post-Tennessee press conference on that Monday.
Oh, with the crazy game?
Yeah.
Oh,
when
yeah.
T-Bob snapped it, and
I
I was like talking a million miles an hour, and I said that he won because of blind luck, and the fans are, you're happy that you won. The fans are ticked and everything. Anyway, it was described in the newspaper as a 30-second diatribe that never morphed into a question. That was me. So then a week later, I'm at the game, and Pittsburgh had gone down to the 6-inch line. Guy had caught a pass, and he rolled into the end zone, and they initially called it a touchdown. But Peyton challenged it, and they brought it out to the 6-inch line. You're like, okay, what good? They're just going to punch it in, right? They got Roethlisberger playing quarterback. He just needs to fall into the end zone. Well, wouldn't you know it, there's like an illegal procedure. They back up 5 yards, and I think they went for it, and Saints stuffed them. So they got no point. So because of challenging a call at the 6-inch line.
Wow.
So I'm trying to compliment him. I'm trying to say, Coach, you challenged that call. What I should have said
looked like an easy score. You challenge the score. The
what
call.
I should have said was take nothing for granted or whatever.
Yeah.
And he just said, "Well, if we don't challenge it, it's a touchdown. You get the boob question of the day."
Wow. and you said, "Well, that's 2 this week."
Exactly. Right.
No, I remember that question before to last. That was not a diatribe. The diatribe was by Bobby Hebert after the 21-0 loss.
Yeah, he went up a few more. Man, Coach, that's ridiculous. You don't put Jared Lee in the game. What are you thinking?
Yeah, that was crazy, man.
Yeah, that was. And Les just sat there with his hat on his head. He didn't move, and that was a dark day for LSU. Alabama National Championship. Glenn, I've kept you long enough. Thanks for coming down today, and appreciate all your work.
Enjoyed it, man.
Read his work on Tiger Rag, and you're covering the Saints for Fansided as well.
Thank you.
All right. I'm Jacques Doucet. Tell people about Jock Talk. We'll see you later on.